So I added a little part to this series on Judaism, and as we go through world religions and cults, and of course, with the things going on in Israel, incidentally, it just so happens that we are talking about Judaism, and I was thinking about what to cover tonight, and on our trip on Monday, as we traveled down to Virginia, Eliana and I were listening to a simulcast on satellite radio of one of the news channels and listening to the things going on, the reports. And one of the channels interviewed the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. Now, a lot of those organizations oftentimes tend toward the more liberal or progressive side of things. But really what he had to say was just really, really powerful. And he was saying that, making it very clear, you don't call these people militants, don't call them fighters, call them terrorists, call them, by what they really are. And it's not simply militant as in a military type of operation, because that wasn't a military type of operation. I mean, they organized it like it was organized as in some aspects of military planning, but it was just sheer brutality. And some people have called them animals, but I got to thinking, well, that's kind of an insult to animals, just how bad it was. Even animals don't do that kind of stuff. But they are the brutality. And one of the things that is also notable is hearing and seeing the responses around the world. Now, the Anti-Defamation League exists to combat anti-Semitism, and why is the subject of anti-Semitism such a big deal? Why are Jewish people so sensitive to and aware of things that could even be perceived as anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish? And there are times where you might think that they take things as anti-Jewish when it really wasn't anti-Jewish. There are times that happens. But the fact of the matter is, there is no other group of people that experience the type of hatred and opposition as the Jewish people. That's just the way it is. Other than worldwide, also in a lot of countries, Christians aren't very well liked and cared for. But throughout history, the Jewish people there's been a special target that has been put on them, and the reason for that, I believe, is because they are the people that God chose to accomplish His plan as far as the promised seed, the bringing forth of the Messiah, the bringing forth or giving. He gave to them the oracles of God as far as giving them God's word, His word to write down, and He used them in a great way to preserve it. The first New Testament church there we see in Jerusalem was made up of Jews, and Jesus was a Jew, and then that particular piece of land is a very important part as well. Why is it that one small piece of land is so controversial? Out of all the real estate, how many nations of Israel, as far as the land area is concerned, could you fit into Saudi Arabia, for example? I mean, you could fit a lot. There's a lot of real estate out there in the surrounding nations, but why that particular piece of land? But the responses, even here in Massachusetts, there were students at Harvard, and there were demonstrations in New York City and other cities around the world where they were celebrating what happened. They were, basically just protesting, or not protesting, but they were demonstrating in support of Palestine, the Palestinians. And so I'm kind of adding a little bit in here about, and this is just a very brief overview, but just to give you the, kind of put this together as far as why there's a sensitivity about anti-Semitism. And it's because of a history of tragedy. They have a history of being hated and killed. If you look at the entire history of the nation of Israel, you see that pattern repeated over and over and over again. And so there's a history of tragedy that has included much death and heartache because of the extreme level of and also because of the extreme level of hostility that they face compared to other groups. And then it rallies, as I mentioned, the rallies around the world, and including the United States. There are people celebrating what happened or just simply making excuses for Hamas doing what they did, and others saying, they brought it on themselves because they're the occupiers of the land, and so they just brought it on themselves. And so just make this very clear. We should always be very clear on this, is that the Jewish people are not the ones who are the occupiers. Other than the fact that they live there, that means they occupy. But in this label of occupiers, implying that they are occupying someone else's land. But that's not what they are. And the other thing is that they call them occupiers in the sense that even that some would be called occupiers in the sense of the Gaza Strip being occupied, but Israel hasn't occupied the Gaza Strip since 2005. And it was shortly after that the Palestinians voted Hamas into power. So they were voted into power by the people. And so now Israel does have tight controls around the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, those other areas that the Palestinians reside in. But they haven't occupied the Gaza Strip or controlled in the sense of running the Gaza Strip since 2005. But they are not the occupiers. But you think about how, it's one thing when, in the past there have been the rocket fire, then there's been the retaliation and the tit for tat back and forth. And people will blame Israel and they'll say they need to back off. But then you think about the sheer brutality of what has happened, and yet there are still people who would celebrate that, who would oppose Israel, and they would be supportive of the Palestinians in a time like that. Even in our own halls of Congress, there are mostly Congresswomen, a few of high-profile ones that one of them has already had, and apparently hasn't taken it down, a Palestinian flag outside of her office in the building where her office is, and then others, that are saying, or someone like the governor of Michigan who made a very broad, vague, general statement about violence in the region, but didn't come right out and mention Israel by name. And then there are those in Sydney, Australia, who were demonstrating, and there literally a chant broke out that said, "Gas the Jews," they were saying. So that is happening. Now, fortunately, those people seem to be, in the Western countries, seem to be in the minority. But it's a small group, but it is an increasingly growing group when you have the universities where there's so much of that activity in the universities where they believe that Israel is the oppressor of the Palestinians. And so there's also vandalism. More vandalism takes place regarding the Jews than pretty much any other group. And like I said, I'm not downplaying opposition to Christianity because even some of the ultra-Orthodox in Israel are opposed, very, very vehemently opposed to Christianity. So by saying this about Israel and about the Jews does not mean that I don't recognize wrongdoing. I'm not implying that they can do no wrong or that everything they do is right or should be applauded or supported. But they are a people who have a history of being hated and killed in various times and for various reasons. And so there's a sensitivity to that just because of that history of tragedy. And so I'm going to we're going to overview just a couple of things tonight, and just to put this all in perspective. And the first one here would be Egypt, in Exodus chapter 1. So let's turn there. So we'll look at a couple of scriptural accounts. We'll look at them, and then just a more recent historical account. But in Exodus chapter 1, so you go all the way back to this time. Exodus chapter 1. Exodus chapter 1 and verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, and he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, and mortar and brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And God ended up blessing the midwives because of that, that they would not go along with that. But and you're going to see actually a recurring theme in a couple of these examples. Here we have an attack on the babies, and that's what really brought this to mind when I heard about the babies that they found who were slaughtered by, and that's what it was. It was not simply an attack. I mean, this was literally a massacre, a slaughter. It was a cold-blooded massacre. You know, we hear the history around here of the Native Americans and the settlers, colonists, and the different things that took place, massacres, and this is a massacre. It should be listed in history as a massacre, not just an attack, but a barbaric massacre. So, but the babies are included in that. And then we go over to Matthew chapter 2, and we look at the example with Herod. Matthew chapter 2. Now, one of the ones I skipped was the Babylonian captivity, which was also a very dark time in that case, it was the nation of Judah, because it was the divided kingdom at that time. But when you look back at in the time in Egypt, they barely, certainly generations had passed, but barely, the nation of Israel wasn't even founded hardly with the 12 tribes of them, and with Jacob or Israel and his children there moving to Egypt, and then eventually they multiplied, and that's when another Pharaoh rose up that didn't know the good that Joseph had done. But then we move to Herod, and in Matthew chapter 2, and verse 1, Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. And when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. And so they departed. He told them, you need to come back, report to me when you find them. And so they were going to do that, but in verse 12, and being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, In Ramah there was a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. And that's a quote from Jeremiah. It says Jeremy the prophet. It's talking about Jeremiah, and chapter 31 and verse 15. And I'm just going to turn over there quickly to read that. But Jeremiah 31:15 says, Thus saith the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children, because they were not. And one of the things that is, and it was particularly when you look at the Babylonian captivity, you look at all of these things that have taken place in the history of the nation of Israel, the people of Israel. And despite the great tragedies, God always shows himself strong on their behalf. He does some good after that for them, because then in Jeremiah 31:16, Thus saith the Lord, Refrain thy voice from weeping, and thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded, saith the Lord, and they shall come again from the land of the enemy. And so this was one of those things regarding the Babylonian captivity and in Israel. But then there was also Israel was the nation of Israel was conquered by Assyria. Judah was taken captive by Babylon. But God was saying, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring them back. And God did restore them to the land. And so God has done that multiple times, where he delivered them with a great deliverance from Egypt, and brought them out, performed great miracles in the process, and then brought them back from captivity, the nation of Judah, back from Babylon. And then, and there are other things that happened, of course, during the time of Christ with the Roman rule and occupation, and just many things throughout history. But every time God has had a blessing for them afterwards. And so the next one that we come to is not a scriptural account, but it's definitely a more recent historical account, was definitely Hitler and the Nazis. And so this was one where, guess what? After they went through the horrors of the Holocaust, or they actually, in Hebrew it's called Shoah, and in Yiddish and Hebrew it's called Herben, which means destruction. Shoah means catastrophe, but it's most often called Holocaust. And well, guess what? 1948, the founding of the modern state of Israel. God did a work in regathering them, bringing them back to the land. They were already coming back to the land before that, but that was the formality of it. And I'm just going to read a portion from Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, this was the Holocaust, 1933 to 1945. It was covered numerous years, and during that time of World War II. But it was the systematic state-sponsored killing of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children, and millions of others by Nazi Germany and its collaborators during World War II. The Germans called this the final solution to the Jewish question. Yiddish-speaking Jews and survivors in the years immediately following their liberation called the murder of the Jews the Herben, the word used to describe the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586. They say BCE, but BC. And the destruction of the second temple by the Romans in, we call it AD 70, they would say 70 CE. Shoah, or catastrophe, is the term preferred by Israelis and the French, most especially after Claude Lanzmann's masterful 1985 motion picture documentary of that title. It is also preferred by people who speak Hebrew and by those who want to be more particular about the Jewish experience or who are uncomfortable with the religious connotations of the word Holocaust. Less universal and more particular, Shoah emphasizes the annihilation of the Jews, not the totality of Nazi victims. More particular terms also were used by Raoul Hilberg, who called his pioneering work the Destruction of the European Jews, and Lucy Davidovich, who entitled her book on the Holocaust, The War Against the Jews. In part, she showed how Germany fought two wars simultaneously, World War II and the racial war against the Jews. The Allies fought only the World War. The word Holocaust is derived from the Greek holocauston, a translation of the Hebrew word olah, meaning a burnt sacrifice offered whole to God. This word was chosen because in the ultimate manifestation of the Nazi killing program, the extermination camps, the bodies of the victims were consumed whole in crematoria and open fires. Even before the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, they had made no secret of their anti-Semitism. As early as 1919, Adolf Hitler had written, "Rational anti-Semitism, however, must lead to systematic legal opposition. Its final objective must unswervingly be the removal of the Jews altogether." In Mein Kampf, Hitler's book, he further developed the idea of the Jews as an evil race struggling for world domination. Nazi anti-Semitism was rooted in religious anti-Semitism and enhanced by political anti-Semitism. To this, the Nazis added a further dimension, racial anti-Semitism. Nazi racial ideology characterized the Jews as subhumans, and there's a German word here for that. Russ might know that. Untermenschen.
Under people are lower.
Yeah, how do you say it?
Untermenschen.
Untermenschen. All right. But yes, subhumans, that they're not truly human. They're lesser than humans. The Nazis portrayed the Jews as a race and not as a religious group. Religious anti-Semitism could be resolved by conversion. Political anti-Semitism by expulsion. Ultimately, the logic of Nazi racial anti-Semitism led to annihilation. And so, these are just a sampling of some of those key moments in Jewish history where they have had history of being hated and killed. And there's also some of those same talking points are used today about Jews being out for world domination, and they'll be focused on, well, look at the Jews in Hollywood and in the news media and all of these things, and oftentimes that's used as a way, as a springboard, as an excuse for opposition against the Jews. And certainly there's much ungodly material that comes out of Hollywood that is produced by Jews, but as I believe it was in the book called Holy Ground, The True History of the State of Israel, I'm pretty sure, the author points out, pretty sure it's in that book, but the author points out that it's the Gentiles who've been the biggest consumers of that material. So they like to blame some people against the Jews. They blame the Jews for Hollywood and the media and all of this. Who's consuming all of that? Who's taking it in? And so the talking points. So about 100 years ago, I think it's at least 100 years ago, there was a book published called "The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion," which is most likely, from my understanding, is a Russian forgery, but it was supposedly from Jews who were publishing their plans for world domination. And so that was also used as an anti-Jewish propaganda and literature. So many things have taken place, and some of the same talking points are being used today, and that is why there's so much sensitivity to it, because they have reason to be sensitive about it. They look at their own history, they look at and there's certainly many other aspects of their history that I am not covering, but that is why there's a sensitivity to it. And we need to have an understanding of that, that's where they are coming from, in large part, of being used to being opposed, used to having hatred and tragedy. So the one more thing about the history of being hated and killed, we see something in prophecy in Revelation chapter 12, and then we'll stop. We'll finish there. Revelation chapter 12, we see the dragon, and Revelation chapter 12 and verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Now, this is not the Catholic Church. This isn't, you name it as far as the different ideas there are as to who this is. This is very clearly, it's not Mary specifically in connection with the Catholic Church, clothed with the sun, moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Who is that? That is the nation of Israel. That represents the nation of Israel. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up into God. Her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And then goes on, there's a war in heaven, the great dragon was cast out, and but that is, there's still yet to come. The devil's still not done in what he is trying to accomplish with wiping out, trying to destroy the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, the Jewish people. And that just goes on. And the events of this past weekend was just yet another example of the hatred. When you have people who say they just want them completely wiped out, they don't want the state of Israel to exist, they hate the people, that kind of thinking is just rooted with the devil, with Satan. And now God has used in the past, like with Babylon and Assyria, he would chasten his people with their relationship with the land, as far as he used Babylon, and they had the captivity, but at the same time he later on brought destruction upon Babylon, and he showed himself faithful in restoring the people to the land. There was the rebuilding of the wall, rebuilding of the temple. And so God is not finished with Israel yet, and no matter how many times the devil, the dragon, Satan, tries to wipe them out, God will still show himself strong, no matter even through and after and in spite of the suffering and pain that they deal with. But we need to be aware and conscious of the idea, the mentality of why is it that there is such an organization that would be for basically to defend against or to oppose anti-Semitism, because it's simply because there's so much of it, and there's a growing amount of it, and even here in the United States. And so we need to be a people who take the biblical position, be on the right side of recognizing, first of all, that yes, they're not occupiers, say no, they're not occupiers in the land, saying that yes, we realize our differences in the sense that they do not accept Jesus as the Messiah, and we do trust Jesus Christ to be as our Savior and recognize Him as the Messiah. We recognize that difference, but we also recognize what God's Word says about them and what our responsibilities are to them and how they should be treated, how they should be viewed, and we need to be lined up with what God says about that. And don't be ashamed, if you come across people, and I'm sure there's people around here in Greenfield who are very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and don't be afraid to educate them. Don't be afraid to speak out about why that is wrong-headed thinking if they are opposed to Israel, and use the Bible. Use the Bible. Use it as an opportunity to witness or proclaim the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then talk to them also about Jesus Christ. But I was actually talking about, or I was talking to actually he's a Jewish person. He's involved in the, this was actually a few weeks ago, involved with the synagogue here in town. And he had said about a couple years ago, they had hired security because of increased threats against them. And apparently there are, I don't know if he said either white supremacist or neo-Nazi type groups here in Western Massachusetts, and they were actually, they were on the lookout and trying to be vigilant. And so they had hired security because of the activity that was going on. And the same thing holds true today with the danger, the level of danger that sometimes they are in, and they try to go about things peacefully and just go about their lives, but there is just an unnatural satanic hatred of the people, and that is why there is such an attention on that group of people in that land, and we need to be on the right side of things, showing our care, our love, and support for them. And Evangelist Brian Sharp with the Gentile Ministry, they put out a call. They wanted the people to, if anybody wanted to do a video of just very quick, less than 10 seconds of saying we support Israel or Am Israel High, and that has to do with the now my mind is blanking. The people in the land and God giving them the land, and the resilient nature, and Israel of always being there. And do you remember what exactly that means? I don't remember. So I did a video. I was sitting in the hotel there in Virginia, and I pulled out my phone and I wanted to participate in that. So I said, this is Brett from Greenfield, Massachusetts, on behalf of my family and our church. Our hearts are with you. Our prayers are for you. Am Israel High. So that's what I did. So on behalf of our church and on behalf of my family, I sent that message along. So tomorrow, I think tomorrow is when they're trying to get that done. They're going to be sending it over to people in Israel. And I don't know, there'll probably be a lot of people. That's why they're only doing less than 10 seconds. But it's basically just, and it means a lot to them. It does mean a lot to them, the humanitarian help, the shows of support, but then the actual humanitarian help. So, but realize that the story's not over yet, but when we get to Revelation chapter 12, and you see the events of prophecy that are still yet to unfold, these things just keep coming, culmination, just building and building to that culmination. But then in the end, there will come a day when God will resolve all of it. He will take care of all of it. That is our faith. That is our hope. That is the hope of Israel. And our desire is just to, we desire that they recognize Jesus Christ as the Messiah. That's the most important thing. But we do know that as a nation, God will not forsake the people. He will not forsake His people, that nation that He had raised up and chose.